Catherine Woolley, what is your favourite game?
My favourite game is Shenmue. So, I suppose, like, I started playing games when I was little, probably like, I don't know, 5, 6. I've got a twin sister, so we would do things together. So, like, our first kind of thing we played games on was the Spectrum, played stuff like Survival, I think it was called, and, I don't know, Horace Goes Skiing and all that kind of stuff. But we were always a bit late in on the kind of game purchasing, because, like, when we had a Spectrum would have been the early 90s, and, like, we got a SNES, a Master System next, and that would have been, you know, when people were probably getting PlayStations and stuff like that. We were always quite delayed because we didn't have the money, so we always got stuff secondhand from, like, boot sales. Boot sales were always, like, the best way to get games, because you get, like, a console and maybe, like, I don't know, 20 games, and maybe pay, like, 10 quid for it. And then you'd have this whole collection of things that you could try out and see what you liked, which kind of got me then into, well, me and Charlotte into collecting games. We're kind of big collectors. And, yeah, it kind of just went on from that. So we'd buy anything that we found and then play it and see what it was like and see what we kind of liked and didn't like. Like, I don't know, it just kind of ballooned. And then whenever we found new consoles at boot sales, we'd buy them. Like, the first console that we got brand new. Also, you'll find that I'll say we a lot if I'm talking about, like, my history, which is kind of weird for some people, but it's because I'm talking about me and my sister as, like, one. I'm not, like, some kind of ball collective or something like that. But, yeah, like, the first console we got brand new was probably a PS2, like, actually bought from a shop, because everything before that hadn't been. But, like, it was just, you know, constant throughout primary school, secondary school. If we found a console in the newspaper cheap, like when we first got a PlayStation, our first game with it was Parappa the Rapper, which was awesome. We found it so hard, like my child brain couldn't really comprehend it, because I was trying to match what it was showing on the screen, but of course with Parappa, you had to kind of go outside of that, especially if you wanted to get, like, cool ratings and stuff like that. But I think the Dreamcast was one of my first purchases myself, from, like, saving up money. And actually, no, it wasn't. So, okay, the way I first played on a Dreamcast was in secondary school. I was friends with this boy, and he really wanted to play Knights on the Sega Saturn. And we had a Saturn, we had Knights, and we traded it for, like, a couple of weeks, and I borrowed his Dreamcast and a copy of Shenmue. And that was really, really cool, because the Dreamcast actually ended up being one of my favourite consoles. It's got, like, a great selection of games on it, including, like, Shenmue, and then Jet Set Radio. The House of Dead games were great, and I don't know, it just feels like it's one of the consoles that has a really nice selection of games. And, you know, poor Sega's last console as well. But, yeah, like, I've just always loved games, always collected them, and I suppose the 360 was my first on-launch purchase. But then since then, I've done a lot of that. I like to buy things when they come out, which is silly sometimes, of course, when you have price drops. But it was always the bane of me when I would buy collector's editions brand new, and then, like, a couple of weeks later, they've gone down, like, £20 or £50, and then they're, like, trying to shift the stock, and I was just like, oh, I paid full price for that. Why did I do that?
Oh, I can only imagine that feeling because I've had this happen to me fairly recently. With PlayStation Vita TV or PlayStation TV. Like,
oh no.
Like, well, it wasn't fairly recently. It was about a year and a half ago, more or less, because I was desperate to get a PlayStation TV so I could play Persona 4 Golden on the big screen again, and Argos had it for around, how much was it, 85 quid, and then I bought it at that price, and I was happy enough because like it was the only reason I was going to buy PlayStation TV for Persona 4, which kind of brings back to the discussion we mentioned before we kicked this off. And then a few weeks after that, Argos cut the price by nearly half.
Oh no!
It was 40 quid at that point. I was just like, fuck.
But it happens, and you never know when it's going to happen. Like sometimes that happens, and then they sell out everywhere, and then you can't find them, and it's worth loads of money. And then you're just like, yeah, I've got a rare gem that I'll keep for the rest of my gaming life. And then most of the time that just doesn't happen. But yeah, like I've always had love for games, and I never would have thought it could turn into like a career back when I was a kid. But I think the love for games has always just pushed me forwards.
Rewinding back slightly, like when you were starting out, like in with the SNES and all that there, like what specific games were you playing at that time?
Oh, I think of what we had. So if I go to Master System, I know we played a lot of Psycho Fox, and of course Sonic. And then we actually had a Master System with Alex Kidd in it as well. But I'm trying to think of SNES. I know like a lot of Super Mario World. Didn't really have any of the rare SNES stuff. We only kind of got the general stuff that you would get, like Street Fighter 2 and things like that. Mega Drive, Sonic's. I've always had a love for Sonic. Sonic 3 was great as well, even though a lot of people don't like it. It's got a great soundtrack. So I'm just trying to... N64, like Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye. I don't know, like, the one thing I always hate is whenever people ask me, like, it's usually, what are you playing at the moment? And then my mind blanks, and then I can't think of what I'm playing. And then after the conversation, I'll be like, oh darn, I'm playing this, and this, and this, and this. I could have mentioned all those things. And it's the same with right now. It's kind of like, I've got tons and tons of games still for all the old consoles, being a collector, keeping everything. And I was like, of course, like, so we had Link to the Past, although I have a love for Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, like one of my favourite Game Boy games, hands down. I remember when we went and bought a copy of Resident Evil 2 for the N64, brand new, so it cost us £60, which of course back then, it was just like, oh my god, this is so expensive. But now, you know, games are still 60 quid, and you just don't think about it. I remember buying Majora's Mask pre-owned from Game, well, probably Electronics Boutique back then. That was like 35 quid. But yeah, like, I've always kind of just played a wide range of games. Like, the things I don't usually play is, like, sports, which is usually the kind of response you get from people when you ask them what kind of games they play. They'll be like, oh, I play everything, but I don't usually play sports that much. Like, I mean, 1080, I love 1080. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, awesome games. But, yeah, sports never has as much of an impact on me. Like, it always used to be, I used to love JRPGs. Everything about JRPGs. Although I think since growing older and having less time, they've gone out of the picture. Because, like, I'd love to give them the time, but, like, I mean, like, Persona 4, you can sink so many hours into that game. Like, because I got Persona 3 first, and I was like, this game's amazing. I put, I don't know how many hours into it. And then Persona 3 Fairs had come out, Persona 4 had come out, so I got them all on PS2. But I never got round to playing 4 because I didn't finish 3. Because I had that kind of number thing in my head. Not that they're really related in any way. The same with like Final Fantasies and stuff like that. I have that whole horrible number issue that a lot of people have. where they can't play the later games if they haven't played the first ones. But I don't know, just a bit of everything. I really want to name you more games, but I have like an Excel document of all the games I own. It's pretty crazy. But this is the thing, when you get so many games, you forget what games you have, and then you accidentally buy games again. Well, of course, with like the rare games, like amazing games like Secret of Mana and Harvest Moon, not that we've actually managed to track that down yet on the SNES. You remember those games, but then it's like some of the lesser games or the less well-known games that you forget about. Like, I still want to track down a copy of Lufia 2 on the SNES, because I absolutely love the Lufia series. And, I love games. Everything about games. And I just wish I had, like, I always used to think when I was in secondary school, I always used to think it'd be nice if I could take out, like, a couple of years at some point in my life and try and play through all the games I have. But of course, something like that is still kind of impossible, I would think. That, and you have to be able to take that time out of job and stuff like that. Like, have a sabbatical just so you can play games.
Like, if you had to guess off the top of your head, how many games do you have now?
A few thousand.
Wow. Are you willing to ballpark that specifically?
I've counted before to tell people, because I've got sheets for each platform in my Excel doc, so you kind of just go to the bottom and then just keep adding them up. But like, I feel bad because I've been a little bit less buying games for kind of like mine and Shard's joint collection, just because I have a lack of space now, and I feel that I need the space to be able to store things. But like, if I find a rare game every now and again, I'll buy it. That, and it's really hard to just come by older games, because like, where I live in Horsham, there's like no boot sales, and if there were, I don't think anyone around here would even have old games anymore. We had a retro kind of store. They got bought out, and now it's a place that mainly sell unlocked phones, and it's just like there's no kind of, at least in the area that I live, there's no second-hand kind of gaming community. Whereas, like, if I lived up north, there's tons of that up there. There's tons of different stores that you've got that are independent. They're all selling different games. Of course, they'll sell them for what they're worth these days, which for some games can be a lot of money. Because, like I said, I mentioned Harvest Moon before. Harvest Moon had a UK release, but not like a normal UK release. I think it's available in German, and it's really, really hard to track down. And for years, I've been trying to find a copy to give to Charlotte as a birthday present. But it can go for like £100 to £200 just for the cart. But I still want to find it, and I will one day. It's just like things like that can be really expensive. Like, Charlotte got me Persona 1 and 2 on the PlayStation, which was really, really cool. Of course, it only came out in America, but it's still a nice thing to have. And then, like, I can play it on my my PlayStation. So yeah, I like everything. It's just a shame that you can't find things so easily anymore. It feels like that stopped me from buying stuff, because then it means your main way to purchase games is almost just eBay, and then that's getting into a whole horrible mess of bidding and getting stressed out if you don't win something.
Oh, just, yeah. I think the cautionary tale here is stay away from eBay.
Yeah.
So yeah, just get into how you got in the industry side of things then.
Okay, so like, as I said before, like, little me wouldn't have thought I could work in games. And yeah, secondary school me didn't think I could get into games either. It's actually Charlotte, my sister's, fault that I got into games. Not that it's her fault. It's because of her that I got into games. So like, we were finishing off secondary school and looking at universities and stuff like that. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But Charlotte was really looking into it, and she wanted to get into film at the time. And she found a university that did a films course and a games course. And I was like, I could give that a go. But like, little me thought all games were made in Japan, and they were all programmed, because like, the internet didn't really have that information, or at least where I looked, the internet didn't have that information. And the the only things that kind of gave me information about the industry were like dev diaries, but back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and there weren't that many. Like the main one that always springs to mind when I talk to people about this is like Silent Hill 2, the nice kind of fold out edition had like an extra disc that had a dev diary on it, and of course, you know, they're all Japanese. And it's like, oh yeah, of course, all the comic games are made in Japan. Then, you know, Silent Hill is a great series, so yeah. And then like, so Charlotte encouraged me to do this. I did a degree in games design. It was alright. Like Mike Bissell was 2 years above me on my course, so it might have been a good course because he came out of it and I came out of it. That's what I always like to say to people. But it's also just because we're probably just both very enthusiastic people, so we like games and can do good in games. Yeah, so I did that for like 3 years, doing a design degree. I'm never really sure how relevant it actually was, but I got a job at EA, like within, you know, like I moved, so I went to university in Wales, and I'm originally from Essex, so it's like opposite sides of the UK really. But then I knew when I finished university I didn't want to move back to Essex because there's not really a games industry in Essex. You've got a lot in London, but that's kind of it. This is of course after finding out everything about the industry and where all the companies are. Guildford used to be the games hub, of course, because we used to have like Cody's in Guildford, Lionhead of course used to be in Guildford, or Lionhead. EA were in Guildford. They've now gone down to just Criterion, but they had Brightlight, which is where I started. And I was kind of like, okay, well, if I want to work in games, I'll move to where games are. So I moved to just outside of Guildford in the hope that I get a job, which was quite kind of out there, kind of being like, yeah, I'll get myself a job. I'll sort this out. And then I think we moved to like Aldershot, which is like cheaper than Guildford, and I applied to loads of places before my course was finishing. And I was like, okay, I don't know if this will go anywhere. Oh, I should probably sign on to the job centre just in case it doesn't, because I had no income. I had nothing else coming in. Signed on. The guy laughed at me at the job centre and was like, you'll never get a job in video games. That doesn't happen. You don't get those kind of things. I was like, oh, thanks for the encouragement, mate. But then within 2 weeks of signing on, I got a job at EA. So it was pretty good. That was working on Flips, which were a set of interactive books for kids on the DS. I like to think that my enthusiasm to putting kids' books on the DS helped get me the job, because you could imagine that some people might turn their nose up at something like that and say, oh, that's not a real game, I don't want to work on that. Whereas I was like, oh no, that sounds amazing, I could do this. Oh, I could do this to make it good in this way. And then I got a job at EA working on those. Trying to think how many. I think seven boxed products, and 6 like DSiWare, if you remember the DSiWare kind of stuff that Nintendo did, in 6 months. It was really quick turnarounds because, you know, they were books and we were putting kids' books on the DS. It was just a matter of coming up with the best interactions to add to them to make them enjoyable for a kid and trying to encourage kids to read. So yeah, did that. Was chatting to them people on other teams because EA was a lot of contract work. So it's kind of trying to figure out where I could go into next. So talking to 2 different teams that they had running on the go at EA Brightlight, and then got onto the Harry Potter team. Worked on the last 2 Harry Potter games. It was cool. They were pretty short projects because the films, of course, came out quite close to each other, like Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2. And of course, like a film game, you'd expect wouldn't have a really long development cycle like some other big kind of games that are their own IPs, just purely because, of course, they'll only have started making the film at a certain point and they'll only have a script ready at some point. So yeah, that was then. And then like now I work at Creative Assembly. I started at Creative Assembly 4.5, coming on 5 years. It'll be 5 years in June, I think. So I started in 2011 working on Alien Isolation, and that was crazy because that was working on Alien Isolation for like, I don't know, 2 years before we announced it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Something like that. Because we announced in 2014 when we came out. So like that was quite a while of not being able to talk about it. It was crazy because like people would be like, oh, cool, so what are you working on at Creative Assembly? And I'd just be like, oh, on our job page we have a picture of the alien egg. Yeah, we're working on that. They'd be like, oh, what does that mean? Does that mean like a Total War alien game, or does it mean something else? And I'd just be like, oh, can't say anything. But it turned out really, really cool, and I'm really happy that I got to work on it. I'm so happy with the levels that I got to make, and that was a great experience. And now I'm working on Halo Wars 2, which of course we announced Gamescom last year. And yeah, it's going really good.
Just for the record, can I just say how excited I am for Halo Wars 2? You can't see this because obviously this is an audio record, but we both have our webcams open, and I have my arms in the air, like fist pumping, like just like excited for Halo Wars 2. I was quite frankly shocked Halo Wars 2 was coming, and
when they announced it, yeah.
And
I think a lot of people were,
and more so that Creative Assembly was involved, the Sega studio with a Microsoft IP. But no, you sure showed that job seekers allowance guy, anyways. In regards to, you sure showed that job.
But yeah, I totally should have gone back and been like, look, I got a job. Oh, look, it's in video games. Belittling the job career that I wanted to go into. Yeah. I think he was just angry, maybe. I don't know. He might have had a bad day. Well, I'm sure he has to deal with a lot of crap. So.
Fair enough. Although, that being said, thanks for your belittling encouragement. Let's get into it then. Your favourite game, Shenmue. So before Shenmue, like, there was obviously games made by Yu Suzuki that came before Shenmue. Like, did you play any of them?
Yeah, I was always a big Virtua Fighter fan. Actually, did he work Virtua Fighter? No, he was Sega Rally. No, he wasn't Sega Rally.
No, that was Tetsuya Mizuguchi.
Was he? Yeah, sorry, I'm a massive Mizuguchi fan as well. Mizuguchi went to a BAFTA event a few years back, and me and Charlotte basically bought his back catalogue with us, including like Sega Rally on the Saturn in its lovely little shell box. No, I'm trying to think of Yu Suzuki. Did he do Hang On?
He did. Yeah, he did Hang On and Space Harrier.
Space Harrier, which of course makes sense because you can play them in Shenmue. But yeah, like I'd played Space Harrier before. I had played Super Hang On. I'm trying to think of what else that I might have played that he did. Because he was like producer on lots of games, and he was like a director, I imagine, for Shenmue. But it's weird because of course, like, oh yeah, there you go. He was a director producer on Virtua Fighter 2. Virtua Fighter 2, like I loved. I can still remember like playing Virtua Fighter 2 with Charlotte until like midnight in the evenings, just doing like standard. I want to call it deathmatch. I'm so used to new terminology of things. Just like a standard fight. I'm not even calling a fighting game. I'm trying to think. Battle, like a battle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like all that. Like actually, yeah, of course, Virtua Fighter is him because 3TB came with Project Berkeley in Japan.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you my Shenmue fanness. You like people won't be able to see it, but you can see it on the webcam.
Yeah, like for what it's worth, like we said just beforehand, like I could see Catherine could see me. Like you can't see this because obviously this is audio only, but we can see each other.
So this is part of it, which is these are Shenmue.
Holy fuck!
But this isn't everything. So I've got it on the Xbox and everything else. But there we go. So there's Project Berkeley. So it came with Virtua Fighter 3 TB on Dreamcast in Japan. It was just kind of like a little video showing the town, and you had Ryu moving around, and it was kind of like, ooh, what is this? But I bought that. Well, I got Virtua Fighter 3 and a Japanese Dreamcast after I played Shenmue, so I didn't know about that previously. But yeah, I do really like Shenmue. It's kind of like Charlotte has helped me with this though. So I've got just like standard PAL. I have What's Shenmue, which was like a promotional thing they did with one of the managers from Sega Japan. He was actually in the game. American, Japanese. They did a game called US Shenmue, which has the English voice acting.
Can you hold that last one up so I can take a screen cap of it? Because I'm taking screen caps of it. Bear me a second. There we go.
And then, like Shenmue 2 is actually probably one of my, well, probably in a way, I like it over Shenmue in a way, but it's also mainly because, so the PAL version of Shenmue 2 didn't have translated VO, so it was the original kind of Japanese. And then, like, since getting Shenmue 2 on the Xbox, I actually prefer this version because the voice acting is so much better, and you're so used to hearing, like, Daylin say, like, da-di-da, migi-da, get you to move crates left and right, and it was just, I don't know, the better version. And, like, Japanese. But yeah, like, I'm a big Shenmue fan. I like to think that it's all thanks to the guy that lent me the Dreamcast. So I've got, like, a really nice strategy guide, which is Japanese.
Bear with me a second, and just... There we go.
So yeah, that one's, like, really nice. Because it is just a Japanese strategy guide, and we didn't get a strategy guide for Shenmue 2 in the UK. So that's really nice. And then, like, I bought this off someone a while back. And then, like, nice old primer guides.
Nice.
Really cool. And it's just nice, but, like, I never ever saw this in a shop. But then this guy had it, and I was like, oh, wow, I'll get that. But, like, for example, with the Shenmue 2 one, like, it just goes to show that when the information isn't out there, people don't realise it, which is in relation to the duck minigame that was found in Shenmue 2, like a few years back. It might be a few years back now. Or it might be maybe a year ago. And that people posted YouTube videos about, I never did that. I didn't know it was in the game, but it's just crazy that it's such a big world that you just don't realise what's in it. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Yeah, like, I've got Shenmue on the Xbox as well. Oh, and actually, one last thing. A guy at Creative Assembly who left just before Christmas got me this, which I thought was amazing. So it's a vinyl.
Wow.
It was like a new release that happened, I think it was last year. And I thought it was the nicest present, because he knew I was a massive Shenmue fan. And he just happened to order it, because he thought I might want it. And I was like, "Aw, thank you so much." But yeah, so, like, I think, like, my love of Shenmue did, I suppose, slightly come from enjoying Virtua Fighter, because, of course, Virtua Fighter is a core component of Shenmue with the fighting. And I guess I just somehow instinctively went to it, I guess thanks to Bradley for lending it to me back in secondary school. I just kind of went from there. And then I really enjoyed it, and I was like, oh wow, I really need to buy a Dreamcast. Because I had to try and finish it before I gave it back to him, which I managed to do. But I was kind of like, okay, I need to buy a Dreamcast and buy the game and play it again. Because I was kind of rushing to play it and to, find out what happened at the end. And I still don't think I've explored it enough, because it is a massive game. And there's so much you can do, and so many different conversations you could potentially have with other people. So I think, thinking about it in my head, I suppose I have, nostalgia for it. In my eyes, it's probably, way better than it actually is. I mean, it's a good game for a game that was made in, 99? 99? No, 99 is too early. I think 2001.
No, it isn't. It's 98, 99.
Oh, is it?
It.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. And I think of it, really highly in my eyes. But I think even still, the last time I played it would have been a couple of years back, because I've got my Dreamcast here as well. For whenever I feel like playing... Well, it used to be for whenever I felt like playing Shenmue or Jet Set Radio. Of course, now Jet Set Radio's become available on everything else. I don't need to play it specifically on the Dreamcast. But yeah, it's one of those games that I've always just kind of gone back to and have a love for.
Well, you just kind of answered my next question after all of that, which is what attracted you to Shenmue, so I can skip that.
It's weird as well, you saying, what attracted you to Shenmue. I always had a high regard for Japan and Japanese culture, but I never had really seen that much of it, and it always felt like Shenmue was my eyes into Japan, because it is, it's basically, a small suburb in Japan, and you're moving around doing what you can do in Japan. Heck, I've been to Japan twice now, and the best thing in the world is going to a gashapon machine and getting capture toys, or going to a vending machine and drinking your drink outside of it, because it's impolite to move while drinking. So you drink at the vending machine like Ryu does, and then throw it away. So yeah, it's my little insight into Japan. When I was a kid, I was like, oh, Japan's amazing, I really want to go to this place. And yeah, even with the tomato convenience stores with, because you could win super awesome capture toys, or you could win a Sega Saturn or Space Harrier and Hang On in the convenience stores, and they do that through I believe it's called Kuji, which is it's like a little raffle, and you just pick out your ticket, and you go to Japan, you get that too, and it's just great. It's Japan in a video game.
That's probably the best tagline to a game I've ever heard. It's Japan in a video game. Love it.
I mean, of course, it's a condensed version of Japan, but it allows you to see so much of this kind of, I suppose, section that Yu Suzuki has created. That, I always think of it as Shenmue was my first introduction to, I suppose, a virtual world, or a living virtual world. And I loved that because, Shenmue's been an inspiration for lots of games, and it has also, led me to play other games as well. So, yeah, I'm a big fan.
So, as a big fan of Shenmue, how would you try and pitch Shenmue to someone? What is the elevator pitch of Shenmue? How would you put it across?
You know what, these days, I don't even know if anyone would do it, because it is...
So familiar?
It's a story of revenge set in 80s Japan. Would you let me make this game? Because, I suppose there's they had the term of free, which was I can't think of what it stood for now.
Full Reactive Eyes Entertainment.
There you go, Full Reactive Eyes Entertainment, and it's just the fact that they. I'm trying to think of how I could phrase that for an elevator pitch, but I don't even know if you could. It's I want to make you a game that embodies Japan, but is the story of a young boy's revenge for the death of his father, which spans across multiple countries. But then, of course, hardly even managed to span across that much, with, it finishing at Shenmue 2. You going to... I can't even think of the name of the place.
Hong Kong?
Shenhua.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but then that was almost one of the best bits about Shenmue 2 as well, was the fact that I mean, Shenmue, you can think of Shenmue as, you could give it the tagline of Shenmue Japan, and it'd be Shenmue 2 Hong Kong. But then, of course, you leave Hong Kong. But it's just nice that it bridges across two different countries, and that even, like, in Shenmue 2, like, Ryu is so used to his kind of Japanese lifestyle that when he's living in a new environment, everything goes wrong for him. He gets his bag nicked by some idiot little kid who turns out to be your mate in the end of it. There's a motorcycle chick who, I suppose, Ryu drives a motorbike at the end of Shenmue. But, like, Joy is this kind of highly sexualized woman with her kind of little rose tattoo on her hip, I believe, and, like, this tiny little top and these kind of flashy jeans. That she's, like, this kind of really high contrast character to everything else in the environment, because the rest of, like, Wan Chai feels like this really kind of, I want to say, like, groggy city, but, like, because he's kind of down on his luck and everything's gone wrong for him, and then it just doesn't have the same homey feel for him that Shenmue does. And I think it's kind of nice, because then he learns to step up in his ways, because at first he's living in, like, I don't know, this kind of, like, literally a house which has some beds in it, and there's, like, what looks like homeless guys living in there. So, like, I think it's quite nice, because it's almost like trying to depict someone who's run out of luck. That's, like, a good way to phrase it. Yeah, I can't even remember what the question was.
It was basically asking the elevator pitch of Shenmue.
Oh shit, the elevator pitch. Yeah, I think, like, the kind of game that Shenmue is, it'd be really hard to make that kind of game these days. I mean, of course, Shenmue 3 had this Kickstarter, and they're hopefully going to do something really cool with that. But, like, the only reason they could do that is because they have the fans of the original to back it up. Like, if they didn't have that, and if they didn't have such a big name behind it, would a game like that even be made, or sort of being made these days? Especially, I mean, like, it used to be the most expensive development in the Guinness Book of Records. I'm sure that's been beaten now with how expensive games are to make these days. But, with how expensive a game like that would cost to make, because of how big it is, especially these days, if you upgrade it, think of how many different environments there are, different aim sets for all the people, all the VO for the conversation trees, the fact that it's got fighting mechanics within it, as well as kind of like a conversation system, and I'm trying to think what else, even just like the little jobs, which of course are mini games, but that's that's something that someone has to design out, proof, and then get working. It's like there's a lot to that game that I don't think anyone could afford to make these days. So I'm slightly cautious on what's going to happen with Shenmue 3, because I mean they got a lot of money out of it, but I don't know if they got enough money to make it live up to the previous games.
I think that's most people's fear, to be fair.
Especially everyone wants it to be good. So
touching on the history of Shenmue, then, like, it started out on the Saturn as a Virtua Fighter RPG. Like, as a Virtua Fighter fan, is that something you would have loved to have played before it became Shenmue?
I mean, I would have tried it. I love Virtua Fighter. I think I liked the worst character in 2, which was Leon, the French guy. He had, like, terrible blonde curtains and wore, like, this kind of, I suppose, like, if you use, like, Back to the Future terminology, like a life jacket kind of thing he's wearing, you could say. Similar to what, like, Marty wears in Back to the Future 1. And, like, he was the worst looking character, and he was a stupid kid, and I played as him. I don't know why. Like, in Virtua Fighter, I always really liked Jackie Bryan, because he was kind of like a main character. I mean, he wasn't Akira, which you can kind of feel that Akira was the main influence for Ryu, because, I mean, they've got the same kind of spiky hair. I suppose if you put two characters together, they would be most like each other from the Virtua Fighter series and Shenmue. And I think it could have worked. I mean, I don't know if I would have known to pick it up based off the fact if it would have just been Virtua Fighter RPG. I suppose if it had the name on it, like Virtua Fighter, I would be like, oh cool, I'll give this a go. Because I mean, I still picked up Virtua Fighter Kids with their big heads and Megamix and Fighting Vipers, but then that was just off the same kind of franchises. So I definitely would have gone with it. I don't know what it would have been if it had come out on the Saturn, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, okay, yeah, you know, the Saturn and the Dreamcast, they're both old machines, but there's no way the Saturn could have handled something like Shenmue. It probably would have been, I mean, Shenmue was on, 3 discs on the Dreamcast? God knows how many it would have been on the Saturn if it came out on that. What would it have looked like? You wouldn't have a reactive environment with a weather system or anything like that. It'd just be like, I think it's definitely a good thing it migrated onto the Dreamcast kind of era, because if it hadn't, the game never would have had anywhere as much impact, because they would have been so limited by what they could have visible, how much they could have put in the game. That, and of course, like if it had come out on the Saturn as well, they would have spent less time in development, so maybe it would have been half what the game is today.
It's interesting when you put it like that. Like, can you picture like Shenmue as it is on the Saturn, like as it was on the Dreamcast? Like, can you picture like a kind of Shenmue on the Saturn and think, like what that could have been like before it went to the Dreamcast?
I feel like they would have been so limited. I mean, I don't know if Shenmue really took advantage of that much of the Dreamcast. I imagine it must have, with like, the Dreamcast was supposed to have a really good, is it a GPU in it or a CPU? I don't know. I'm never that great when it comes to, well, I just buy consoles for the fact that they're consoles, not tech specs. But I don't know, just like Shenmue has such a, from my nostalgic memories, and I've played it like 2 years ago, it has such a beautiful world, and that world just wouldn't have been there. That, and the fact, like, I mean, how much of the data on those discs must be from all of the voice acting, the audio they had for dialogue. I mean, would a Saturn game really have been able to handle that? I mean, you had Saturn games with bits of dialogue here and there, but generally, you know, you wouldn't have anything like that. So I think if Shenmue had come out on the Saturn, I think you'd have a lot more kind of uninteractive moments. I think a lot of it would have had to have been video. I mean, yeah, they'd still have QTE, because, I mean, Road Avenger and Dragon's Lair had QTE, really. So you could still do that, but I think maybe it'd be more kind of like an adventure game, like an old style adventure game. So it'd be more you're watching and not taking part. But then again, I mean, they'd have the fighting nailed down from Virtua Fighter. It's just how much they could add alongside that. I don't think it would have been much.
We touched upon it there just briefly beforehand, but the budget of Shenmue was just like crazy for its time. Like, it was something like $40 million, something like that. Or sorry, no, hang on, let me see, let me check. It was
I'm sure the internet can tell us.
It was something like, I don't know. Let's see, what does the internet tell us? 70 million it cost at the time. And if you adjust it for inflation, from what I remember of the conversation we had in Shenmue last year with Matt Reynolds, now of Hello Games, it'd be adjusted for inflation, it'd be around 100 million now, which is insane to think about when you do actually think about it. So like I'm trying to think of how to phrase this into a question, but basically, how does like the budget of Shenmue kind of, I don't know how to phrase that into a question basically, but it's insane to think of how $70 million for a game like Shenmue back in 1999, 2000 for when it came out, compared to now with, say, I think it was 100 million for GTA 5. Like, it easily made its money back for GTA 5 back, in 2013, but it's insane to think of that comparison now, for, 14, 15 odd years later.
Well, yeah, and especially because, like, I mean, this says here on the Wikipedia page, despite sales of 1.2 million, Shenmue didn't recoup its development cost and was considered a commercial failure, which, I mean, you could easily mirror that to a lot of games these days, that they do have that kind of AAA budget that goes into them, but then they just don't make it back because it's not the next Call of Duty or the next GTA, so they don't have that player base there to help sort it out. And I mean, Shenmue was a big kind of gamble for them, because heck, 70 million, what equates to now about 100 million. They spent that much money on it. They must have been really hoping that it would sell, because it was the first kind of. It wasn't the first game like it, because I mean, of course, it's an RPG with other elements to it, but it was a massive kind of leap for Sega to take. And then of course they made the sequel, even if it apparently didn't make its development cost back, but they obviously had a hope that it would. But then of course it came out near the end of the Dreamcast, didn't come out in America for Shenmue 2, so I guess they must have realised after spending, I mean, I don't know how long they must have been developing Shenmue 2 for. I don't really know how long they developed Shenmue for either. It must have been a good few years for a game of its size. It's just like how these days it's a massive leap to spend that much money on a game, because unless it is one of the big titles, you're not going to get it back. I mean, we've seen it recently with Lionhead being closed, of course. That, I mean, I don't know how much money they must have put into Fable Legends. It's been in development for a while, and then it just got pulled. But then it also had gone free to play, so whether it was going to make its money back, who knows?
And it's worth mentioning, I make that comparison of Shenmue and GTA. It's worth noting that Shenmue was basically a cult hit, whereas GTA was a lot more mainstream. Like GTA 5 broke all entertainment records when it launched, so it's worth bearing that in mind in terms of how both games kind of basically made their money back. Like, how many people played Shenmue back in the day? Not many, I would imagine, whereas GTA 5, a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the install base would be for how many consoles have GTA with them, but I mean, yeah, okay, Shenmue was a big title for the Dreamcast, but then how many Dreamcasts were there? It was on one platform, whereas, GTA 5, okay, yeah, it originally came out just 360 PS3, but then, of course, they enlarged their player base by then bringing out on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. So, they gave as many people possible the chance to play it, but then that kind of game, because of its legacy, you're always going to have a ton of people buying it. Even if the game would be bad, not that Rockstar make bad games, because they never have, but they've got the people there, and it always goes to show, even just with Rockstar, that just them releasing a trailer. I remember when GTA 5 was originally being announced, and then they'd do countdowns for trailers, and it's there's not many other games that can do that.
No, I agree.
And I could see though, if they wanted to try and do that for Shenmue 3, they probably could pull it off. They could have a teaser for a trailer, or they could have a countdown from when they're doing a trailer, because there are so many people that want Shenmue 3, but who knows what Shenmue 3 is going to be like, so I just hope it's going to be good.
We'll touch upon Shenmue 3 later on, and I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, that. But yeah, story-wise then, Shenmue, how did you find the tone of what it was going for?
So I think it doesn't help with the English voice acting on it, but I always found it all a little bit comical. I could never really take the story that seriously, mainly because it's not a great story. I mean, it's a revenge story, that's it. I mean, heck, you get a cat, and in my eyes it's called Mimi, because I always call the cat Mimi. Whichever, played it on Xbox, played it on Dreamcast. Every time, Mimi. So it's Mimi, are you cold? And the cat would be meow. He'd be haha, you're so cute. And it's that kind of, simplistic dialogue. It doesn't have the right tone to it, even though, shortly after his father's died, and it's raining, and it's a gloomy day, and there's everyone with their umbrellas. Well, if the weather was raining that time. Everyone's really kind of solemn, and it's kind of oh, did you see someone on that day where there was the black car when it was snowing? Was it snowing? It might have been snowing. And I think because dialogue when it comes to games has a big emphasis on how people will take it. And I think just the kind of, I suppose you could say it's down to translation maybe, but I never really felt the game was almost a game to be taken seriously because, you know, I suppose going back on my kind of, it's a virtual world, it's Japan in a game, like, I saw it as that because, you know, hey, I'm looking for my father who got killed by Landy. Oh, I'm just gonna go get a capture toy from this machine. Oh, now I'm gonna go to an arcade and play on some games. Oh, I'm just gonna go buy some soda. Oh, now I'll get back on trying to revenge my father. It's kind of like I don't know. It's because the game allows you to break the kind of flow of the story that maybe it stops it from being able to be taken seriously in my eyes. That they allow you this breadth of different mechanics and different stories go off on the side and find out about other things and find out about different characters, that it doesn't have enough of an emphasis on the main storyline other than the main story takes you through the game. It then doesn't allow you to take it seriously. Or it doesn't allow me to take it seriously. Like, I love the game to bits, but if anyone ever's like, oh, what do you think about the story? And I'm like, oh, it's a bit plain. You know, you're revenging your father's death. It's got to do with a mirror. Yeah.
That's the elevator pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, like, whenever I think of Shenmue and whenever I, like, talk to people about the game, it's never the story that I'm talking about. Although, you know, at points they do a really good job, and they have some really good moments, and, like, really good chases and stuff like that, and integrating in the QTEs to try and keep you involved, as opposed to just sitting down, watching, putting the controller down. Like, they do good things with that. It's just that the kind of overall plot is just a little bit weak. Which, maybe if you had, like, a really good writer writing it, maybe, that could help it out. But ultimately, it's, you know, a Japan simulator. I suppose it kind of got better with 2 because it was less about that. And there were a lot of moments in the game where you were constrained to what you could do, and, like, you could only be in certain areas at certain points because there were story-related instances. And I remember a lot of the kind of story moments in 2 were very focused on like bad guys or people that work with Landy, and it brought it in a bit more compared to Shenmue and its kind of openness. But the story works. I mean, you know, avenging your father. It's a pretty standard story that you get in a lot of things. I mean, it's nice that, you know, he's just a kid and he wants to do that. I don't even know how old he is. He must be like, what, 19 or 20, Ryu, I think. So it is like, I suppose once again, it's very different to other kinds of games. Because usually you're not a kid if you're avenging your father's death. But, yeah, and then it's weird as well because you've kind of got a love story in there as well with him and Nozomi. I think it's Nozomi. But then he's just like, hey, I'm going to Hong Kong. See ya. And then that kind of gets broken off. Well, it doesn't really get broken off. She just kind of stops seeing her almost. And then he has Joy as a love interest. Not that I didn't think anything happened with that. And then, you know, he meets Shenhua and he's been dreaming about her, which is, I guess, kind of weird, but then that kind of adds the almost supernatural aspect that they add to it near the end of Shenmue 2 as well. So, at least I think of it as supernatural. Not that it really is. But it's a very simple story. But then it's very easy for people to digest as well. I mean, you get some games these days where the story could end up being so convoluted and, like, complex that you don't really realise what's going on, whereas, you know, Shenmue, you can easily describe the story to someone else. It's a kid. His dad got killed. He's avenging his death.
Revengeance.
He's chasing him across the sea on a boat. Yeah. Pretty simple, but memorable still.
Simple concept for a simple story. The reason I ask is because I put this across the Mount Reynolds last year.
Oh yeah.
And that, yeah, it is meant to be this serious story, but it kind of does meander to that kind of goofy, weird, funny stuff at times. That kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but just kind of it just meanders a bit. Like it's jarring. That's the word I was looking for. It just kind of jars at times.
Yeah, it definitely does, because you'll be doing this serious stuff, and then there'll be a guy on a corner being like, "Lucky Hit, do you want to play Lucky Hit?" And you'll be like, "Yeah, I'll play Lucky Hit." And then you'll finish playing, having your ball bounce through the pins and everything like that, and then you'll just be like, "Oh, what was I doing? Oh yeah, I was going to go talk to this person about trying to find out if they knew my father or knew Landy." And it's just those breaks cause the story to be kind of like the second most important thing in the game, whereas almost like exploring the environment and interacting with the environment is almost the most important thing. Even though, of course, if you play the game for too long and you don't go to Hong Kong by the certain date, the game ends. So,
yeah, we touched upon some of the characters just then, like Ryu and Nozomi. Like, how did you find the set of characters for Shenmue?
They're okay. They're a nice mix. It's nice that they have, like me saying earlier about Joy being, highly sexualized, I guess. She's still a really strong character. Like, this is me talking more Shenmue 2, though, than Shenmue. Because, so I suppose in Shenmue, kind of your main characters, like, there's you've got she's not your mum. She's somehow related to you. She gives you your pocket money and stuff like that, though. And then, there's your mate. I can't even think of what he is to you, like, who you spar with. There's Nozomi, there's Tom, I think. Yeah, Tom, the guy that owns the hot dog van, if that's actually what he does. And, like, they're kind of like your main characters. They're all mainly male, except for Nozomi, who is the love interest, and then your parent of some sort. But yeah, they're like, I suppose you make friends with, I think his name's Goro later on. He's like a sailor punk kind of guy. But yeah, it's all kind of, there's a big focus on like male characters, whereas then when you go to Shenmue 2, if I'm thinking in my head right, yeah, it's Shenmue 2, you've got Joy, who's like this really strong character who doesn't deal with other people's shit. And then you've got the other woman, and I'm trying to think of what her name is, and she works in the temple, and she wears a nice dress. It's always the things that you remember about them. I think mainly because there's some really nice concept art for the characters in Shenmue, and they're drawn in such a way that it emphasizes certain bits of the characters. So the woman, I'm trying to think of what her name is. Like, there's this really nice sweeping picture of her, like, she's kind of rotating on the spot, and her dress is kind of swirling around with her. And, like, you catch, is it Leaves? Or is it Blossom? I think you catch Blossom or Leaves with your fingers with her, which is what I found at the time, one of the most frustrating things in the, when I was a kid. Like, the patience of watching a leaf, or whatever it was, fall down and have to press the button at the exact moment. The controller vibrated to help you as well, I think, if I remember right. But I spent so long failing to catch Leaves, Blossoms, whatever it was, between my two fingers, that I think at one point I was wanting to just stop playing because of how infuriating it is. But you get that with a lot of games. You get, like, I want to say, like, the shooting asteroids bit in Dead Space, if you know what I'm talking about. Okay, can I find out what her name is? Guilin? No, not Guilin. Oh, so yeah, it's Guilin that you go to, where you meet Shenhua. Oh, I'm not going to say her name. It's very Chinese, and I'm going to say it wrong. But yeah, like, I think you definitely have. There's definitely much stronger characters in Shenmue 2 over Shenmue, which maybe they learnt that from Shenmue. That, you know, the main character that people cared about was Ryu because he was the only one that had all the screen time. Everyone else was almost secondary to him. They were just there for conversations. Whereas Shenmue 2, they were characters that you had to rely upon, meet at certain times. Well, you did that in Shenmue as well. I think they learnt a lot from the first game to improve the second game.
So, exploring the world of Yokozuka, like, how did you find, like, kind of exploring that big, massive world for its time anyways?
I thought it was amazing. I learned the paths that I needed to take so quickly. I think, I suppose that it relied upon an actual, well, some of it's real, some of it's not. But a lot of it almost felt like an actual environment because of how it was laid out, that, you know, there weren't really... I'm trying to think if there was any kind of objective stuff back then, because, you know, these days everything has breadcrumb trails and objective markers, whereas I have a feeling you just had to go to places without knowing where. Actually, yeah, you had, like, a map, and you could look at a map to try and figure out the area, but then you had to kind of almost plan your route, if I remember right. So you would learn the environment based off that. I suppose you could say almost like how you learn your environment in Bloodborne, for example, because there's nothing else to help you out. You have to figure it out for yourself. And yeah, like traveling around Yokosuka was just great because it was like it started where we lived. It was like a really small, almost, I'd say village, but it was a populated area. But then you'd go into the city, and then you'd, I don't know, pop to a car park to do some sparring, go to a convenience store, go find out about sailors in bars, all that stuff. And I don't know, the environment to me always felt really big, and like there was a lot to do. Although I think probably if I replay Shenmue again, I'll probably realise how quite small the environment probably is. Whereas Shenmue 2 is a massive environment. And I suppose then the difference as well between Shenmue 1 and 2 is, although with Shenmue you still unlock areas in the game through progression in the story. Like unlocking the docks in Shenmue doesn't really unlock you a large space. Whereas when you do that in Shenmue 2, it's a ginormous space that you then have a lot more you can do in. Whereas like the docks in Shenmue almost exist for going to work in a forklift truck. And then an occasional kind of interactive moment that might occur with QTEs. I think I like to remember that they did a really good job on the environment, and it was very easy to remember without the need for kind of signage or stuff like that.
As well as that, like, how did you find the side stuff that you could find scattered around Yokozuka, like the arcade games, like Space Harrier and Hang On, like, or even the forklifts as well? I
thought it was great. I think that helped make it feel like it's an environment that you were then exploring and living in almost, because it added that kind of like grounding element to it. You know, it wasn't just you had to find out about your father. It was that you could do all these other things and felt like you were living in Japan. You could go up to people's houses and see what family lived at each house, because each one had their family nameplate on their kind of, I suppose, wall that led into their house. You could try and find out as much as you could about the world. You could go to parks at certain times of the day and find an old man sat down there and he would teach you a new move. There were all these kind of little hidden things everywhere where if you timed things correctly, you could find a new moment, which if you didn't go there at that time on that day, you might completely miss it. So I think it was a really good way to expand not only the amount that you could do in the game, but kind of your thoughts on the game almost, and that it allowed you to think that you were in Japan. Japan in a game. I think to it. I know a lot of people that didn't bother with all that stuff and that just played it, but then I think at the end of the day, the people that did that didn't enjoy it as much, because if you're just playing it for the story, you won't be getting as much out of the game. You know, I wanted to complete my Space Harrier set of little capsule toys and get all my Sonic toys and try and get a Metal Sonic and a Chaos Emerald Sonic and stuff like that. Like, I think it just added that nice... I suppose it was a good thing for like people who like collecting things, and people because I think if I remember right, like the capture toys were almost displayed on a menu where you could see which ones you were missing, and you'd be like, "Oh, I'm missing this one. I need to find this," and you need to go spend the capture toy machine and try and get them out. I don't know. It's a great game for like a completionist, but then also a terrible game for a completionist if you want to try and find every single moment in the game.
I mentioned this to Matt last year. Like Yokozuka, and the tone of its setting, like it's a bit like with the story. It might feel a bit jarring in itself because, well, depending on if you've played it or not. Like I'll up front, I've not touched Shenmue yet. This is your cue, Sony, to release Shenmue and Shenmue 2 on PlayStation 4 before 3 comes out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Yokozuka, for a town or for a city based in Japan, like it seems very Western focused. Like it feels a lot more Western. It certainly feels a lot more influenced by pop culture than it does influenced by Japan. Would that be a correct assessment?
I don't know, because like you could say that a bit. I don't really know what 80s Japan was like, but I'd also say that it has the feeling that Japan has, which is you could almost say the same with like, you know, or you watch like an anime or something like that, and of course, you know, most of them being based in Japan, you'll see, you know, the normal rail crossings, you'll see like streets of houses, and then you have the telephone lines kind of dangling along the tops, and it's like all these kind of shots that you see, and that makes you think of Japan. And I feel that Shenmue has a lot of that, although maybe it doesn't encapsulate that kind of feeling of like streets with houses on it as much. It does maybe actually feel a little bit more Western with that, but it also still has a feeling of Japan. But maybe that also just comes from having all the things that Japan like contains. So by having, you know, the vending machine on literally every corner, which is how it is in Japan, it's crazy. You could walk 100 meters and find another vending machine, but it might just happen to have different things in it. The fact that their capture toys are only ever really outside of convenience stores or shops, that's pretty similar. There's a lot of things that you can say are very similar to Japan, and especially with the kind of, I think I'd say the urban feel of kind of the city centre, which does feel a little bit Western, but actually Japan does feel like that. It's only really like when you've got the lovely picturesque kind of Japan that you see with like cherry blossoms and temples that it's vastly different from. But I think it gets the kind of feel of Japan in like an urban area really quite well, and it does kind of have those similarities. So I think they did an alright job with it. I think it was very much influenced though by like popular culture and trying to encapsulate everything that people would be interested in at the time. But no, I think they did quite a good job about it. What did Matt think? Because I listened to, I think about half of Matt talking with it, and I went back to it the next day, and it lost its place.
I can't remember off the top of my head, and the funny thing is, I was just listening to the episode today. Oh dear. Oh dear.
But yeah, I think it can feel a little bit Western, because I think a lot of us can feel that, you know, we see certain kind of cultural things for Japan, and we think that's what most of Japan is like, but really it is really urban. And I mean, you look at things like Shibuya Crossing, or I suppose you look at like another good game like, what's it called? The World Ends With You. Like, you get to see, you know, urban Japan in that, and I think they do a good job of it. Adding that to my list. I keep thinking of things, and I'm like, oh, I want to add that.
Like Persona 5's coming up, and I think that's going to be set in Shibuya as well this time. Like, it's the first time it's going to be set properly in Tokyo, and that seems like, going by the trailers, anyways, that's going to show modern Japan very well on us.
I think that definitely will, because I always thought that Persona, although not really set in distinct areas, really felt so Japanese. I mean, especially like Persona 3, going to school every day. All of that, just, it screamed Persona 5 being where it's set now, I think that'd be great. There'll be so many people who'll be like, oh, I want to go to Japan.
Kind of like Shenmue. Ah, there we go. There's the new slug line for Persona 5. Persona 5, Japan Simulator 2. Thanks for listening to My Favourite Game. This is the first of a 2-part season finale that you've just heard. Next week is the second part of that 2-part finale. Catherine Woolley on Shenmue continues next week. Until then, bye bye.